Hello again, my DIY loving friends, and welcome to Medicated Housewife DIY, where crafting and mental health come together. Transform your home with these stunning fall Dollar Tree DIYs. Discover how to create high-end, budget-friendly decor that will elevate your space for the season. So what are you waiting for? Let's go DIY together. For this first DIY, I had these two glass bowl vases from Dollar Tree in two different sizes. And of course, it's fall, they're round, so automatically my brain says pumpkin. So that's where we're headed. I unraveled some Dollar Tree nautical rope into individual pieces, and then I cut 8 long pieces for each glass bowl. I'm going to use hot glue to attach each of the 8 pieces of unraveled rope to each of my bowls, starting at the opening of the bowl and extending to the middle of the bottom of that bowl, spaced out as evenly as I could get them without having to measure. And I left the excess rope pieces hanging at the middle bottom of the bowl, because we'll be using them later on. Once all the vertical pieces of rope are attached to both bowls, I am going to use more unraveled rope and wrap in a circle around the whole bottom of that bowl, starting at that bottom edge and working my way in toward the center of the bowl. I wrap the rope it's going to go right over those glued down vertical pieces until I just have those leftover hanging pieces that are still dangling there in the middle. But the glass on the bottom is totally covered in wrapped rope. I do continue to wrap that rope up the center around that bunch of leftover pieces of rope, just far enough up to kind of shape them into a stem-like look. And then I'm going to totally unravel all of those leftover pieces that are in the middle so that they kind of get like random and messy looking. And then I start wrapping those messy unraveled bunches of ropes around themselves, securing them with hot glue and shaping my stem as I go along. And there really aren't any rules to this. You can make your stem look any way you like. I wanted it to be a little messy looking because that's how I like it. I think it's more authentic looking that way. I used a scissors to trim all those frayed out ends and adjust them to my liking. I then attached more rope to the smaller of the two glass bowls in the exact same way as I did the first bowl. I had a bunch of loose fall leaves from some old Dollar Tree fall picks, so I assembled a color combo I liked. I used some hot glue to attach the leaves at the base of my nautical rope stems on both of the bowls. I grabbed my favorite leafy jute, which I will link for you guys in the description box below, and I simply tied one of my infamous sad little bows. I am seriously bow challenged, folks. I tied the bow around the base of the stem just to give it a little green color. Lastly, I grabbed some assorted fairy lights that I had from Dollar Tree and placed them inside the glass bowls. And here are my lit glass pumpkins. So cute and so fall. You guys, it's really here. I love the way this looks. Absolutely perfect in a windowsill at night or inside on a shelf or as a centerpiece for just a little autumn mood lighting. Super easy and really pretty. For this next DIY, I'm using these 3 plastic Easter eggs from Dollar Tree, and initially I planned on painting them, but switched gears, so just disregard the paint. I recommend you glue the 2 sides together just to make your life a little easier. I learned this the hard way, so do as I say, not as I do. I had a bunch of this Raffia from Dollar Tree, and I decided instead of painting, I would wrap the pointy sides of the eggs with the Raffia. So using some hot glue to secure that Raffia in place, I simply wrapped the entire pointier side of all 3 of my eggs completely in Raffia so that none of that plastic or the color of the plastic underneath was going to be visible. Once all 3 of my eggs were wrapped in Raffia on one side, I cut 5 long pieces of this thick jute that I got on Amazon, and I will link it for you below. I cut 5 pieces for each egg, so that's 15 pieces of jute total. Starting from the unwrapped top of the egg, I glued that piece of jute from the top down to the beginning of the wrapped Raffia, as you can see me doing right here. And I'm just letting the remainder of that jute piece hang down. We're going to be using it later on. So I spaced out my 5 pieces on each egg as evenly as I could without having to measure them, because it doesn't have to be exact or perfect. And I attached the 5 pieces of jute the exact same way on all 3 of my eggs. Next, I cut a long piece of the same jute, and starting at the Raffia part, I'm going to wrap that jute around the other half of the egg, using hot glue to secure it in place. I wrap the jute right over those vertical pieces of jute that are glued to the top of that egg. I'm going to wrap that half egg all the way up to the top, and we're just going to leave that extra piece hanging out right in the middle of the very top of the egg because we will use it later. Then I take those vertical pieces that are hanging down and I'm going to hot glue them straight up to the center of the top of the egg, as you can see me doing right here, leaving a bunch of those extra pieces just standing straight up at the top of the egg. And I'm going to do this to all 5 pieces of jute there and on all 3 of my eggs. I take one of those leftover jute pieces and begin wrapping it around itself and the rest of the bunch of jute, keeping all of those pieces together, and they're starting to form a bit of a stem. I unravel all of those jute pieces that are still standing up at the top of my stem until they fluff out a little bit and they start to look a little crazy. And I use the scissors to trim them shorter and to neaten them up just a little bit. I'm going to do this on all 3 of my eggs. And these are my Raffia and Jute acorns, and I love that there is so much texture going on with these. I love the neutral color and the amazing texture. Perfect little accessories for a tier tray or even in a decorative bowl. A gorgeous but simple autumn-inspired piece of home decor. These are a winner in my book. Next, I am starting with this Dollar Tree football wreath, but don't worry, we're not making a football, I promise. I'm using this thick jute I got on Amazon, and I will link it for you below. I am going to be wrapping the lower half of this wreath form with the jute, although both sides of the football are the same, so there's really no lower or upper. We are just going to be wrapping half of the wire form with the jute and using some hot glue every so often to secure that jute so it stays in place. This part is a little time consuming to wrap it, but it is still super simple to do. Next, I had this piece of thick off-white canvas just lying around in my stash, so I decided to use that inside the jute-wrapped half of my wreath form because it contrasted so nicely with the color of the jute. So I'm using some hot glue to kind of press that canvas inside the wreath form, attaching it to that inside on the wrapped wires, as you can see me doing here. And I did my best to stretch that canvas and to keep it taut as I glued it so that it would look smoother and not all creased up inside of the wreath. I folded the ends over so that everything would look neater from the front side of the wreath. It is not an exact science with this. You just have to stretch and manipulate the canvas to the best of your ability to keep it smoother looking. You don't really have to worry about what it looks like in the back. And like my grandmother always said, what's behind me is not my problem. And she was very wise. I had this very thick nautical rope from Amazon, and I will link it for you below, but you can use the nautical rope from Dollar Tree for this as well. I cut pieces of the rope to span across the front of the unwrapped side of the wreath form, and those first 2 pieces I cut were a little longer because I wanted to fold them around the edge of the wire form to be a little bit more prominent than the rest of the pieces going up the wire form. Hopefully that makes sense. Plus, to be fully transparent with you, I was running low on the rope, so I started to cut the pieces after those first 2 rows of rope to be the exact fit across the front of the wreath instead of to wrap around the sides like I did with the first 2 rows, just to make sure that I didn't run out of rope before I finished. Luckily, I did have just enough rope to cover the whole side of the wreath form and just a small piece left over that I unraveled and used a small elastic band from Dollar Tree in the middle to hold it all together, and that's what I decided to use as a stem at the top for my giant acorn. Yes, spoiler alert, we're making an acorn. I needed something to really stand out in the middle of the wreath to divide the acorn bottom and the cap that's at the top. So I grabbed some of these Dollar Tree foam hair rollers, which are basically like little mini pool noodles. Same concept. I took the wire out of the middle and cut the roller into 2 halves. I needed 3 of these halves to cover across the middle of that wreath. So I needed some Dollar Tree masking tape to attach the 3 foam roller halves together, and then used a little bit more tape to secure them all into one long piece of foam. I want to wrap the hair rollers completely in jute twine, just the regular size jute from Dollar Tree, but I also wanted to make sure the ends of the foam were totally covered. So first, I covered both ends of the foam with some jute going across the ends the long way, and I did that on both sides. And once both sides were covered in the twine, I then started wrapping the jute around the length of the rollers from one end to the other, as you can see me doing right here. Hopefully that makes sense to you. Basically, I just didn't want to see any foam. I only wanted to see jute. Once the foam was wrapped, I wanted to deepen the brown color so it would contrast more with all the nautical rope on the wreath. So I'm using a mixture of folk art antique wax, which I will link for you below, and I mixed that with some water and saturated the jute covered foam until the brown color got darker and deeper. Next, I hot glued that jute covered foam piece across the middle of the wreath where the two different halves meet up, because I wanted it to jut out and resemble the protruding edge of an acorn cap at the middle of the acorn. That's what I was going for anyway. I didn't love the rough edge of all of those cut pieces of nautical rope across the top, so I used some of this macrame jute ribbon, which I had in my stash, but I'll try to find something comparable for you to link below. And I used it to cover both sides of the wreath, covering up all the nautical rope edges so that you can't see, you know, the frayedness at the ends. It was kind of finishing it off a little bit. Then I took my rope stem and painted the top part with some of that antique wax and water mixture to deepen the color of that half of the stem a little bit. And then I used some hot glue to attach the frayed stem to the very top of my acorn. I grabbed a couple of those loose Dollar Tree greenery leaves that I had lying around, and I hot glued them just under the base of the acorn stem. And off camera, I also attached a piece of jute to the back of the wreath form so that I would be able to hang it. Lastly, I grabbed another piece of that jute ribbon and hot glued it to cover the elastic in the middle of my nautical rope stem. And this is my giant jute and rope acorn wreath, and I really love it. Now, you almost never see me making wreaths, but I truly love the rustic textured look to this acorn wreath, and I think it's a perfect door hanger for this fall, really bringing all of those autumn vibes. But as usual, I want to know what you think. Let me know in the comments which one of these must-try fall Dollar Tree DIYs was your favorite and why. I love hearing from all of you. And if you've enjoyed this DIY video, there's another one waiting for you. Just click the link on your screen for more Medicated Housewife DIYs. Thanks for watching, and until next time, my name is Sarah. I'm the Medicated Housewife, and crafting is my medication.